Good afternoon, everybody. My name is TJ Brooks, and I'm the interim dean of the College of Business Administration here at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Today, it's my distinct pleasure to be able to sort of introduce Dr. Andy Temte and our distinguished lecturer for the fall of 2020. This is the first distinguished lecture we're doing virtually, so hopefully we won't have any snafus. I do want to mention, since we're doing this virtually, one of the great parts about these series is you're often able to ask questions of the speaker, and this time it'll need to be done virtually. So if you see the webcasting, there's a little chat bubble at the bottom of that feature, which should allow you to submit questions. They'll come to me via email, and I'll be able to break in a little bit later in the discussion to share those questions with Dr. Temte. So let me ask Dr. Temte to turn on his camera and join us. Hey, Andy, how are you?
Doing well, TJ.
Great. Thanks again for agreeing to do this. Let me quickly introduce him. So Dr. Andy Temte is the president and global head of corporate learning at Kaplan, and that's where he spearheads efforts in helping employees remain relevant in the future world of work, as well as helping companies continuously improve by attracting the right talent and upskilling and reskilling their workforce. A thought leader on the issues related to professional education and workforce skilling, Dr. Temte has been published and cited in a number of media outlets. Previously he served in both higher ed and professional education type roles. And so really he's a great person to have here for the students. Just as an aside, one of the reasons I wanted him to speak to us today is I've heard students sort of struggling in the last year or so with, in the last 8 months with online education. And really I want you to understand as students that these types of struggles in terms of continually learning and adapting to technology and like are struggles that are going to be an important part of your corporate life in the future. Dr. Temte started his professional career in 1990 working for Dr. Carl Schweizer to build a Schweizer study program into a leader in the CFA exam review. Under Dr. Temte's direction, Kaplan Schweizer became a leading global provider of innovative, efficient, and effective financial educational resources. Dr. Temte earned his undergraduate degree in finance from UWL. He's an alum, go Eagles, and his doctorate in finance from the University of Iowa with a concentration in international finance and investment theory. He holds a CFA designation and has over 14 years of university teaching experience in the areas of corporate finance, investments, and international finance. So welcome, Andy. I'd like to bring Dan Strafford on as well. Dan is going to be our radio voice because my voice is annoyingly high-pitched. And so Dan's going to do the wonderful questioning in that smooth radio voice. He's a senior manager of corporate communications at Kaplan. He's been with the company for 7 years, and he's also a part-time radio host and news anchor who works in media. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan, and I'll cut out and I'll look for your questions via email. Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much, TJ. Appreciate the introduction and appreciate everyone being here. Hope everyone's staying safe and healthy this time of year. Now, Andy gave you a brief overview of your career. Any other details you might be able to fill in for us of how you've come to this part in your career and what your focus is?
Yeah, so I'd like to show everybody my UWL pin. I think you can see that fairly clearly. I served on the UWL Foundation board for 9 years. That's where I got the pin. I think Joe Gow gave it to me personally one day because I showed up for a meeting without a pin. Joe is the chancellor of the institution we're talking to today. In addition to the standard introductory blurb that TJ provided, I think it's important for everybody to know that Kaplan has a presence in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Prior to this summer, I led a division of Kaplan for the last almost 20 years called Kaplan Professional, which was in the business of providing individuals education for licensures, designations, and certifications that are really important as signals of work readiness and work relevance, signals of that level the playing field, if you will, as you enter the world of work. So I'll just give a little side plug here for the value of your degree from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, plus some type of industry recognized credential. There's all sorts of flavors of these credentials, like project management, the PMP credential. There's the CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst credential that I hold. Students in accountancy would be very used to, taking on the CPA licensure. So it's really valuable in today's workforce to be thinking about those additional those additional signals of work readiness and workplace competency that those credentials can provide.
That's great. Great background. And I think helps lay out the conversation as well, really of where your focus has been and where you're now transitioning yourself as the world is largely transitioning as well. Where we want to start was about the reskilling revolution, right? And what this context comes up. I think if you honestly are on any news site over the past year, you've seen reskilling, upskilling. Some are more doomsday with talking about artificial intelligence and what that could mean. Where do you come to this? I know the World Economic Forum has done a lot of work around the reskilling revolution. So what's the context for today's conversation and where your focus really is?
Yeah, I don't want this audience to think I'm really that old. I do have a 30-year career in education that started in 1990. I will be completely naked and transparent here that I'm 57 years old, but I'm a fairly young guy in the grand scheme of things. The point being that when I grew up, my father, my father's expectation was you went to work for a company and you worked for that company for your lifetime. That was the aspiration. So you went to school, you got a degree, you learned a set of skills, and that set of skills then carried you through your career. And when I started in the mid 1980s, the mindset was very similar. Hey, I'm going to get an education. I'm going to go work for a company, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life there. That all has changed over the last 35 years since I graduated. And audiences today, my sons are 29 and 27 respectively. One is a physician in Portland, Oregon, and his career path is fairly well set. He's going to be a physician probably for the rest of his life. But the concept of lifelong learning and continuously improving and always learning and completely setting aside this concept that the learning is somehow done. This generation that I'm speaking to right now, really needs to wrap your heads around the fact that you're probably going to have multiple careers, and probably this many, maybe 7, 6, somewhere between 4 and 7 careers in your lifetime. So the concept of reskilling, which reskilling by definition is the near complete reskilling of one's or retooling of one's skill set for a completely different job, versus upskilling, which is within a particular career, I need to learn additional skills to remain relevant. That is going to be a constant thing in your life. So you're going to graduate from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and yes, you're going to put on a gown and take your tassel and swipe it from, I think it's left to right or right to left. I can't remember. I hold a PhD. I should know, but that is not the completion point, and you'll be continuously learning throughout your career. So organizations like UNESCO and World Economic Forum and many others have just really started to lead the way in getting the population at large ready for these lifelong learning journeys and getting folks really engaged with this concept that I'm always going to be learning.
I'll say, even for myself, I graduated college in 2004. I largely felt it would be a single career path for me, and that I would have this sort of, I might have multiple jobs, but my career would be pretty much in line with what I thought when I was graduating college. That has not been the case, and nor do I expect it to be the case moving forward. As we talk about it here, you've written many articles, you've written many LinkedIn posts, you are working on a book that we can talk about later that is in near stages to being completed. But you wrote an article on the Chief Learning Officer titled "The Reskilling Revolution versus the Clay Layer." Now, we can lay out sort of the terms therein, but to begin with there, you laid out a few assumptions to lead into this discussion, laid out by the World Economic Forum to a large degree. How important is it to you for students, educators, employees, employers to all be on the same page with where this conversation is starting and where it could be going?
Yeah, it may be obvious to this audience, but computers that can think at low cognitive levels, that is the driver of what many are, and World Economic Forum coined the term fourth industrial revolution. And that's where this reskilling revolution concept comes from. So it's important for business leaders, students, and academics alike to just all recognize and agree that skill gaps are prevalent in corporations all around the world. Those skill gaps are when you read in the media, you get the sense that those skill gaps are all technically oriented, relating to coding and computing and artificial intelligence, natural language processing, et cetera. But those skill gaps are actually much broader, much more broad than that. One key skill gap that not a lot of people think about is the skill gap in human skill. I'm on a one guy crusade. I kind of Don Quixote tilting at windmills kind of crusade to get rid of the terminology soft skills. And I would like this audience to not use that terminology as well, because it's all about your behavioral skill, the human skill that you bring into the world of work. When you're in college and university, you don't get a lot of exposure to how creativity and curiosity and critical thinking are just integral to leading teams and leading other people and being an effective individual contributor. I remember very distinctly when I was at UWL. I was in the economics department because what was happening down the hall in the management and organizations department, and oh my God, what's happening in marketing, that was all my whole focus was on adopting and creating a portfolio of technical skill. Now, 35 years later, I couldn't be more wrong about that. And the technical skill that you're learning at UWL is extremely important. But right alongside that, and over the next 10 years, human skill and behavioral skill will actually surpass your technical skill as being important in the workplace. So when you hear leaders talk about new employees not being work ready, yes, they're talking about data and analytics skills. Yes, they're talking about technology skills, but really they're talking about human interaction, teamwork, and emotional intelligence. Those are the skills of the future. So that's that baseline that I want to set for this audience.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And in college, I think the human interaction is mostly secondary, right? It's being on a campus, it's living with other people, it's interacting with the registrar's office and your financial aid office and getting those things under consideration. I wonder how COVID will change that as well from a social interaction perspective, but that's a discussion for a different time. And I also feel as though you really hit on something with the social aspect. We see now in elementary and even pre-K schools, social emotional learning being such a focus.
Right.
And it's sort of that cascading effect that it may not be called social emotional learning, but it is very much that human skill, the ability to interact and be part of a team and lead and follow when necessary, that are skills that are missing and are hard to be taught. So I think this is a conversation that really is worthwhile. So I hope everyone's enjoying it thus far. I want to continue on that first article you wrote. You talked about the clay layer or the permafrost as you described it. And to me, visually, that right away gave me a sense of who you were talking about in this middle manager world. So I think visually it helps a lot. But what do you say to the educator, or even the corporate educator, the ongoing talent developer, or someone along those lines, who feels like these are individuals who they're worker bees. They're not here to get an education. They're not looking to reskill. They're not looking to continue their education, and are largely not worthwhile in this education process?
Well, I think let's take a little bit of a step back, given our audience here.
Please.
Our audience is a set of bright, energetic individuals who are. We'll assume that everybody is young from an age perspective, but maybe not so. But certainly individuals who are in the midst of a significant life change,
Right.
that have a great deal of promise and hope for a future based on the decision that they've made to, maybe some didn't make the decision, mom and dad told them to go do it, or their inheritance would be on the line.
Right.
But let's assume that everybody made the decision consciously to go get an undergraduate degree or sometimes some type of advanced degree to better themselves and enter a new career in the world of work. Well, a lot of individuals, and I count myself in this bunch at various parts of my career, where I became disenchanted, where life didn't turn out the way that I expected. Marriage happened, life happened, kids happened, mortgage happened. I broke my leg, and life happens to all of us. So all of this promise that comes with earning a degree, putting that credential aside alongside one's name, entering the world of work, then work happens. And one of the worst things that can happen to an individual in the world of work is a bad manager. A bad manager can just suck the life out of an individual. So when we talk about the permafrost and we talk about the clay layer, it's kind of a negative connotation, but it's an individual who has become disenfranchised, disenchanted within a company. And in terms of, Dan, you and I take surveys every year about whether or not we are engaged at Kaplan. And yes, there are the highly engaged, which are kind of the unicorns of the business, but there's this big middle layer that says, you know what, I'm kind of on the fence. I'm not, since this is a private survey and nobody can really see my name, I'm going to answer the way I truly feel, which is I'm not really all in. I'm not really all in here. And those are the individuals who've kind of lost touch with their career just a little bit. And they're like, what's really in it for me to learn more, to advance in my career? And the really, really nasty part of this whole equation that we're talking about is that clay layer typically has management responsibility. They're in middle management. So senior management sits up here, the individual contributors are here, and the clay layer owns or manages many of the people in the organization. So if you've got middle managers who are disenfranchised
Right.
and aren't really in it, how do you think they're treating the people that are reporting to them? And how much do we really believe that they're going to say, okay, I'm really in it for this company, so I'm going to engage with my people, and we're going to learn to do new things. We're going to climb up the change management curve, and we're going to all continuously improve and get better. It's a real, the hypothesis that I have, which doesn't take a lot to be tested, is that that clay layer, that permafrost, creates a barrier for organizational growth generally.
That makes a ton of sense. Again, visually, you can see that. You can see how you laid it out. And you were talking about life happening. It always reminds me of The Beautiful Boy, the John Lennon quote. I know you're a musician. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. It's just one of those things. And that's true. And for people about to graduate college, grad school, or starting a new job, that path you see in front of you is going to curve a few times. And it's just about how you react to it and how you go with it. But you started down a path here of talking about culture in a large way, right? About how these middle managers are affected by senior managers, are affected by their day-to-day jobs, how they feel at work. And if they are turned off or tuned out for any reason, that cascades down, right? Then they become a disaffected manager. They become a no-show manager where they're, individual contributors are just doing their own thing. How important is a company's culture and this culture of ongoing learning and reskilling and the like to this entire process and to cracking through the clay layer, the permafrost, and giving that growth potential to a company?
Yeah. So culture is everything in an organization. And I want to give our listeners the notion that culture is not immutable. You can, even as an individual contributor, you can have an impact, and you probably will have a strong impact on organizational culture. So that's the first thing, that if there's any kind of teaching moment that happens here, you're going to go out on job interviews, and I'm speaking to the individuals who are on the call
Not
here.
to me, I understand. Yes.
Hopefully you're not going to go
Right.
on job interviews anytime soon. But you're going to go on a job interview, and you're going to ask about the culture of the organization, and certainly you're going to be provided answers about the culture of the company. But don't take those answers as, again, fixed and immutable answers. You can have a significant impact on culture. Now, when you're in those job interviews and you're asking about organizational culture, you should really be thinking about a couple of things simultaneously. First of all, ask about what the North Star, or where is the company headed. Think about that concept of the North Star. We all live in the northern hemisphere. We all know that the North Star is this many, as we look up into the sky, this many off of
That's right.
the Big Dipper there. So just think about that concept of a North Star, and make sure that the company that you're going to work for knows what its purpose is. What's their mission? What's their purpose? What's the North Star? And if the company that you're going to work for can't articulate that for you effectively, then move on. I recommend moving on to onto the next one. And the reason I talk about North Star is because companies that know where they're going also know what they need to be doing in the near term to actually take steps forward toward that North Star. So the first aspect of culture that you're looking for is an organization that communicates highly effectively and is crystal clear and has created clarity, organizational clarity. So that is the first thing that you want to be looking for, because everybody's goals in the organization, you're going to have as an individual contributor, you're going to have goals, your team is going to have goals, your department is going to have goals, the functional area is going to have goals, and those should all stack up to and align with this North Star and the direction of the company. Now, the second thing about culture that slots right back into this concept of the clay layer and organizational permafrost is organizational health and establishing organizational trust. So I didn't do this before the presentation. My bookshelf is over there. I'm not leaving. I'm simply walking up to my bookshelf over here, and I'm going to get a book. I'm coming back. Here we are. Now, I've recently written a book. It's for publication next year called Balancing Act. We'll promote that later. It's a lot of fun. You'll love it. But this is a book that I want every graduate of every university to read. Now, I'm not getting any promotional benefit from this
Understood.
whatsoever, right? I want to go on record. I certainly know of Pat Lencioni, but that is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. It was written almost 20 years ago, but it is massively relevant today. And what this book does is it lays out basically an organizational pyramid where trust sits at the foundation of the organization.
Absolutely.
Right. And so the clay layer exists because at some point in their career, trust broke down. Trust was not part of the organizational culture, and everybody's looking over their shoulder and everybody's wondering what everybody else is doing. There's not clarity of vision. There's not clarity of mission. Team 1 doesn't know what team 2 is doing. So when individual from team 1 asks individual from team 2 to do something for them, and then thing 2 from team 2 doesn't talk back to thing 1 from team 1, then everybody gets suspicious and, oh, what's going on? There must be something wrong. That right there is the death knell for most most organizations. So this concept of organizational health, which Patrick Lencioni was kind of the godfather, if you will, of organizational health, where again, clarity, communication, and all accountability is another word that we haven't talked about yet, but trust and accountability go right hand in hand with one another. You cannot have organizational trust without a framework for organizational accountability. They must go hand in hand. So that's where this clay layer comes from, or most often, and that's where it's born. And that's and then obviously we're talking about a reskilling revolution. Right. You can't have a reskilling revolution unless you have higher functioning teams. And here's the other thing. I know I've rambled on quite a bit here, but the other thing that is a key ingredient is you have to have an environment where failure is okay.
Right.
Failure is a key part of life. And if we're not learning from our failures, but instead being beaten down at every opportunity because we failed, then that's also an organization you don't want to work for.
Absolutely. And I think you hear during this interview process you were talking about before, a lot of organizations say the same things, but as someone being interviewed, you have the right to ask those questions, and you should be as you go through the process. If you're through 4 interviews in the same organization, ask that same question. See if you get the same answer for the North Star. See if you get the same answer. If everyone's bought in and everyone's saying the same thing, then you have a much better idea. If you get 4 disparate answers, that's a different world to think about. You did mention when we talked previously about the whole self coming to work as well. The idea that as this revolution takes place, more and more people are bringing all of themselves to work rather than just career Dan, right? I'm not just going and punching a clock and doing my job and then separating and going home. Now, obviously, I work from home, so that's a different story. But what do you mean there? Like, what do you see as part of this future of work and the reskilling that more and more people are bringing all of themselves into the workplace?
Yeah. So there's, I think the best way to illustrate this is there's the concept of what's known as the genius jerk. And that concept interlaces with what we talked about previously, where the legacy world of work was one where I could bring my portfolio of technical skills into the world of work, and I added value to the company primarily through by demonstrating
Right.
technical skill. And people, quote unquote, put up with me if I was not if I wasn't a good team player. And people would use phrases like, oh, well, that's Andy. He just, he's kind of a jerk, but gosh, he can balance a
Right.
balance
He's really
sheet
good with
like,
numbers.
nobody else, nobody's business. Wow. We really got to have Andy on board, and we're going to forgive his ticks, and we're going to forgive that he's a jerk to everybody else. That is no longer a health, that is a formula for an unhealthy work environment,
Got it.
because companies are what they allow. Okay. And if we allow genius jerks to continue to rule our organization, organizational trust will continue to be broken over and over again, because Jim the genius jerk, hey, that's pretty good. I'll include that in my next work. But Jim the genius jerk, he's able to get away with it, and everybody else in the organization sees that Jim is able to get away with his substandard human behavior, and so it's okay for everybody.
Right.
Well, study after study has shown that healthy organizations outperform unhealthy organizations, both in terms of their employee engagement metrics, but also in terms of their financial performance. There's a number of articles in Harvard Business Review and other places that demonstrate that the economic returns to healthy organizations exceed those from unhealthy organizations. So we're not allowing genius jerks to live in our organizations anymore. So bringing one's whole self into the world of work does not mean that you drag all of the drama of the neighborhood or the condominium association or your pet chickens into the world of work. It means that you're bringing this nicely balanced blend of technical and behavioral skill into the world of work. And it's this balance between IQ, your intelligence quotient, and your EQ, your emotional quotient. More and more companies are going to be looking for high EQs balanced against high IQs in order to have healthy teams. Because look, not only is it great for employee engagement, it has been shown to make really good, solid business sense.
Absolutely. You are not the first. You will not be the last to make that point. But to clarify, it's just if someone's engaged and they're happy at work, they are much more likely to spend that extra 15 minutes on a project, to push something through a little bit faster, to be engaged, and to be, a little bit more rah-rah, right? To be that person who is looking to better the company themselves. You're not engaged. You're punching a clock a lot of the times. You're just getting in, getting out, and doing what you have to do. And I think that's actually a transition into my next question is, let's assume that we can reach this permafrost. We can get to these managers. They are on the good side of being engaged. We have a healthy organization. We see we have the ability to reskill, to help these people grow. What's your first steps? Like, what are the actionable items from right now to, that first mile marker to say how we engage them and how we start this ball rolling?
Yeah. So we have to provide opportunity, and we have to provide diversity of opportunity. And I mean, absolutely no disrespect to the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse or any other institution of higher learning, but corporations primarily hold the responsibility for this work, because very few people wake up when they're 6 years old and say, I want to be a manager someday, right? And even folks that are graduating from college, very few of them say, I really want to lead people, and I really want to be a manager. So we have all sorts of accidental managers, which is another part of the clay layer formula. But we have the second article that I wrote for Chief Learning Officer magazine. That's where the segue is going, which is that we have to provide this diversity of learning opportunity to our people. But one of the key ways that we are going to do that is by getting rid of legacy human resources practices and rethinking things like the job description, and rethinking how we provide skill attainment opportunities to individuals. Historically, companies would have something like educational assistance programs, where they would just give everybody $5,000 a year to go out and use toward some type of upskilling or reskilling, and it was very ad hoc type of a process. Companies need to be much more thoughtful in the future about how educational opportunities map directly to the goals and the aspirations of the business. Those things have got to be connected with one another, so that Susie or Billy, who work for the company, can clearly see what the next steps are in their career at that business, and the short, sharp educational modules or credentials that we talked about at the top of the hour that ultimately will lead them to greater economic opportunity and advancement within the business. Some companies have this figured out. I don't want to I don't want to give anybody the impression that nobody has this figured out. Some companies have made significant progress in this regard. Many companies, however, have not connected the dots, and they're still using old arcane, again, job descriptions and annual reviews, where you and I get together and I give you all the bad news in one sitting. Those are just dead practices. So we've got to start building job descriptions that center around skill portfolios, where an individual can demonstrate in the world of work that they know how to do something better than they did before, and they're going to get paid an incremental amount for that, so that for you finance majors out there and economics majors, you can calculate the present value of those future earnings and make the decision about whether or not that learning experience is going to be economically viable for you, as well as economically viable for the business. And that's going to have to be much more transparent and plain than it is today.
That's brilliant, honestly, and trying to think of personally how an individual should look at it, and how the corporation or the company is trying to look at this as well. And you hit again, and I know you know this, but just to sort of really hit the point, is it's again about trust and communication. If an employee can see this map and an employer can see that the employee understands it, there's a mutual trust of where that path leads, and a mutual trust of where the next steps go. Whereas if you have an old school business where they're doing that once a year review, and then you're in the dark for the year, that's a vastly different way to go about learning and trying to grow in your career. I did want to ask, there are many companies, maybe these are the old school ones I just referred to, that don't see the return on investment on investing in their own employees, on taking this time to build. This is a big taking, right? To restructure all these things is a lot of time, a lot of effort, and they may not see what they deem a positive ROI on doing it. How do you convince them otherwise? How do you show them that this is the new way of doing business, the new way of growing your company and making changes to how your employees learn?
Yeah, so learning has historically been a cost center for a business. And when times get tough, spending on corporate learning is one of the first things to go. But we're living right through the middle of a pandemic here. It is arguably the worst public health crisis that we've had in 100 years. The economy is it's frankly doing a lot better than I ever expected it would. But there's a huge divide between Wall Street and Main Street here. Main Street is really suffering. The stock market is holding up because big companies are gobbling up most of the activity. But with all that aside, historically companies would view learning as a cost, and when we get in trouble, like we are today, learning would be the first thing to go. Well, when you get in trouble, learning is the thing that you should be doubling down on, because you want to retain your top performers. Who's going to leave when times get tough, and it looks like your company is in trouble? Are your low performers going to leave? Heck no. Your top performers are going to leave for opportunity somewhere else.
Right.
So learning is one of the best things that you can do. But senior management over decades has thought of learning as a cost center and not as an investment, because learning is incredibly difficult to measure the return on investment for. Now, everybody that's on this call has an implicit formula in their minds about what the return on investment of the undergraduate degree from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse is going to be for them.
Right.
You made a decision to go to UWL. Could have taken many forms, but implicitly in that decision is, I'm going to make more money in the future, so therefore this time that I'm spending right now is worthwhile gaining a portfolio of skills and rounding myself. Now, that is an implicit formula that needs to become explicit within the world of work. Companies need to expend the energy, again, to connect learning and learning interventions with the goals, visions, and aspirations of the business, so that they can say to themselves, look, over the next year, we need everybody in our company, or at least this cohort, to be much more skilled on data and analytics, for example, or commercial acumen, or financial acumen, or maybe everybody should learn a little bit about natural language processing, because those learning interventions have a direct tie to where the company is going, right? So many managers and leaders are used to thinking about their employees as kind of coin-operated throwaway resources, when they're absolutely the biggest resource and asset that the company has. So why, if you're going to maintain a machine that spits out widgets, why would you not maintain your current employment set? Because it is, in most cases, not all, in most cases, it's much more expensive to go out into the external market, hire somebody new. You have no idea who those new people are. You don't know if they're genius jerks or not. You're totally taking a risk. So why would we rather go out into the external market and hire new people and not upskill and reskill the existing people that we've put so much effort into?
That makes a ton of sense. We're about 15 minutes from the end of our session. Want to be mindful of time. I saw TJ pop in at the same time.
Yeah,
so
I want to follow up there. I mean, so can you give us sort of maybe a little bit more detailed understanding of what that looks like for a student that's about to graduate as they go off to sort of their corporate life? Like if, the firm might be investing in them in some way, shape, or form, but what is that? What is their corporate learning going to look like, and what should it look like if they want to develop themselves for potentially different careers or even the career that they have?
Yeah, TJ, that's a phenomenal question, and this is where I'll go back to the concept of accountability. So, as a leader who's hired literally thousands and thousands of people over the last 10 years, certainly, I have seen a disturbing trend where graduating seniors and folks that are early in career have formulated this belief that the company owes them something. They owe them the mini golf course, and they owe them free lunch, and they owe them learning and development opportunities that suit their needs and their aspirations. Now, that is a very dangerous road to walk down over the long term. The opposite of that is a company that says, thou shalt, thou shalt, thou shalt, thou shalt, which is going to push a lot of people away, obviously. And the point I'm driving at is learning and education and the accountability for learning and education within a company is a two-way street. The employee needs to come in to the equation with an open mind, an open heart, and a willingness and ability to learn more, to be able to navigate what we call the change management curve, because change happens within organization and change happens frequently. So there needs to be some pliability. When we talk about the human skill of agility, that's what we're talking about when we talk about human agility. And then so the learner needs to be receptive to really owning their development path in conjunction with their leader and manager. So the corporation needs to provide the opportunities, and the individual needs to come in with the open mind and the open heart and the willingness and ability to ride the change management curve to get to reskill, upskill into that new job or that new capability that's going to be valuable to the business. You're working together to build the business that that everybody is working for, to ultimately create returns for shareholders and other stakeholders.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's what I really want students to understand. I know some of them are like, I just want to graduate, and I get that. You get the credential, but I hope they don't think sort of their learning is done. It will change. It'll be different. It'll certainly involve maybe, less of sometimes the raw skills and more of the sort of emotional intelligence that you've discussed as they sort of mature into those roles. But I think it's really important that students get that. I want to steal. I'm going to completely steal your.
Let me
hold on. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me interrupt you for just a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because the embedding and transference of learning back into the workplace is what really matters. Learning for the sake of learning, that stopped unless you want to do it yourself when you leave the doors of the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. There are things that you learned at UWL that were for the sake of rounding you as a human being and as an individual, and that's awesome stuff. You need that. But what matters in the world of the corporation is making an impact to the business and transferring what you've learned back into the workplace. So when you're given a learning opportunity at a company, and I'm talking to your students here, when you're given that opportunity, ask the question, be proactive. Ask, how is this going to matter in my job? How is this going to help me change what I do, get better, and move forward? And that's the kind of learning that you want to engage in. Sorry about that.
I think some of the humanities professors just went, ugh. No, I think, you know, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. And I would just sort of add to that. And that is sometimes the, you know, as we think about sort of those types of skills, the use of the learning is not always immediately obvious. So sometimes it doesn't have that sort of immediate payoff and obviousness to it. But I think, you know, learning is always going to be a helpful thing. That's the liberal arts person in me. So I want to ask you if I can steal your sort of Jim the Genius Jerk, because, you know, I think you just described half of academia. But I do find like, you know, and I'm sure there's people that are listening right now that are like, that's TJ. You just described TJ. Minus the genius part, of course. So just really Jim the Jerk. Seriously though, you know, how are sort of ways in which you see those people really being sort of edged out of positions that they might have been previously? So what are ways in which you're seeing people use these other sort of softer skills to really edge them out in the workplace?
Well, they are done when done right. Those individuals are done a true kindness by their supervisors. When their supervisors show them a path to growth and development from a human skill perspective. And then it is up to Jim the Genius Jerk to either accept that help and say, yeah, I want to improve. Yeah, I can see how I might have rubbed everybody the wrong way with my gruff demeanor. You know, I'm not going to change all my stripes, but there's the old saying, tigers don't change their stripes, but stripes can change, they can be nuanced and change color a bit. So I'm going to engage in a personal continuous improvement journey to adopt and embed and onboard some of these new skills. And then that manager who's done them the kindness of showing them, that individual, the path, now it is up to the individual, Jim the Genius Jerk, to start walking down that path with earnest, you know, and embedding and onboarding these skills, and then having the accountability framework in place. That's the key. That if Jim doesn't make significant progress, then there's another door that Jim is shown, and that's the door out of the organization. So there are two kindnesses there. Many people don't like to view them as kindnesses, but the first is the kindness of showing Jim the way, and the second kindness is showing Jim the door if Jim doesn't want to, because sometimes Jim just needs to be smacked right in the face, not literally, but figuratively, by a change, a dramatic change in their life circumstance, to really understand what the challenge was. But first, we have to lead by example and show the way. And I can attest, TJ, that I have helped on more than a handful of individuals who were in the Jim the Genius Jerk category. I have shown them the path to a different place, and I have seen people learn and grow. It is absolutely positive, but it is a journey of exploration. It is a journey. It is absolutely that journey of self-exploration that one has to go down. And this is where I'll make a plug for your humanities. Yeah. So when you're teaching humanities, make the connection into the human skill and the behavioral skill. That's what's going to bring that all to life. That's what's going to make that come to life for individuals, psychology and philosophy, et cetera.
Let me close with, and I would be remiss if I didn't sort of, you know, publicly thank you for all you've done for the university. You've been a wonderful benefactor of the finance department, the College of Business, and the university as a whole. And that sort of segues into my last question about philanthropy. And for those students that don't know, you know, the one thing we were robbed of in COVID summer was getting to sort of go to every festival in town and listen to the Remainders sing. So Andy is the lead singer for a great rock band for those of us of his vintage age, and listening to some great sort of rock music. And he does most of it sort of as a benefit to somebody else. And so I want to ask you sort of, how do you see philanthropy and that sort of that giving that you do? How do you see that as informing the worker? I mean, you talked about the sort of the worker bringing them their whole selves to the job. How do you see that for students as they sort of think about going forward and become of means to be philanthropic in the community and what they should do along with their jobs?
So many companies today, not all, but Kaplan is an example where every year we provide all of our employees VTO. So this is volunteer time off. Now, right now it's only 4 hours. There are conversations to make it a full day. Many companies do this. When you get that first job, ask about volunteer time off. And then if it is an option for you, take it. Because there are very few satisfactions in this world that exceed the satisfaction of helping another human being. And that is a path to personal growth, that personal growth and reflection that I was talking about before, that sense of giving back to your community. I strongly recommend it. And this is where this is why I talked about the VTO, because that's giving of yourself. You don't have to take a wad of cash out of your pocket. You give of your time and of your talents. That's where you should really start. And then over time, that philanthropic muscle gets built. And then maybe you'll give back to the Alumni Association or the UWL Foundation or Hunger Task Force or the Boys and Girls Club. I've just pitched two of my favorites, there, along obviously with the UWL Foundation. But education, hunger, and our young, you just cannot go wrong supporting those three things.
That's great. And that's probably a great, place to sort of end it. Do you have any additional sort of comments or words of wisdom for the students that are sort of listening as they sort of struggle through what is hopefully maybe the waning hours of the pandemic, as we hope sort of the vaccine arrives and then learning returns to something a little bit more normal in the fall?
Yeah. So I don't mean to,
This is perfect. I expect you to do this. This is
expected
called
me
a
to do it.
segue. I think you professionals call it a segue, and I'm giving you the pitch here.
You nailed it, TJ.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I'm just going to read you the last two paragraphs. I finished the book by saying, I'm glad you joined me on my personal journey to teach, coach, mentor, and inspire current and future leaders as we all work to find balance between strength and vulnerability, confidence and selflessness, passion and measure, single-mindedness and inclusivity, determination and curiosity, and leadership and followership, grace, dignity, and compassion, period.
Oh, thank you. So I just want to thank you from the College of Business Administration here and the University of Wisconsin Crosse, Andy and Dan. Thank you both for your time. It was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, Dan.